Hello again, High Railers. Welcome to this week's installment of N-Scale High Rail with me, Lee, your host. Don't adjust your set. The problem is not in your audio. Today, we're going to be enjoying the dulcet tones of the all-brass gearing of early Rapido locomotives. Stay tuned and we'll check in on the layout. Sounds about the same, doesn't it? So in this episode, we're going to be looking at the handiwork of Arnold Rapido, one of the earliest manufacturers in N-Scale. They started introducing models in the mid-1960s, and a couple of the ones that you see running here are of that vintage. Now, of course, it's not to be confused with Rapido Trains of Canada, which is a current manufacturer that produces some marvelous models that are both smooth running and smooth looking, thanks to their smooth talking president, Jason Schron. But the Rapido name goes back to an early German manufacturer in N-Scale. And all of the products that you see, at least the locomotives, on the layout this evening are of that era and that manufacturer. Our first model is this FA2, which is a very early model, has a very simple drive, a cast metal shell, and as you can see, the gearing allows it to go either fast or not at all. This one's an original paint with the Penn Central 2-color decal on the nose. It's also providing the bulk of the noise for this evening's program. So really, the question is, where does all this noise come from? Well, let's break it down. This is a Rapido FA2 model that I'm working on. I'm going to be painting it soon. It had come in the original Penn Central paint scheme, such as the one that you saw a moment ago riding around the layout. But when you take it apart, the shell itself is cast metal. It weighs about 1,000,000 pounds. And inside is this incredibly simple mechanism. It's a motor with 2 worm gears, period. End of sentence. That's it. It's on a little printed circuit board that has the pads for the wipers to hit that brings the electricity from the track to the motor. But it's a 2,000 volt 100 amp motor that's got 75-foot diameter worm gears on it, and they just grind away on these solid brass gears that are in the trucks. The trucks clip into the shell under the circuit board on these clips here. They're kind of springy, and that's what holds the whole thing together. So as you look at your more modern locomotives and all of the little fiddly bits and tiny parts and electronics and speaker boxes and all the other things that are in there, you realize that it's really quite a bit of overkill. You really only need a couple things. You need that motor, those worms, and those gears to turn the wire, and some DC current to run in and turn it all around. We're going to get to watch them run some more here in a second. The second model we'll be looking at is the F unit that was produced by Arnold Rapido. This example is pulling a train of Arnold passenger cars. Arnold also was marketed under other names in the U.S., notably Parkway. Parkway trains were introduced probably in the late 1960s using the Arnold models. This B&O engine is the same drive as the Rio Grande engine that you see, only in a different package. Later, Parkway was marketed selling items manufactured by Bachmann. Let's take a look under the hood of the F unit. The shell pops off after you spread the sides a little bit. Now this is a little bit different drive than what was in the FA. Again, it's a big heavy casting, but there's a few more parts. But one of the things that makes this one of the better drives of the early days is it is wireless. Now what you see there are those brass rods that bring the power from the truck pickups through to the motor. And it's a little bit tricky to get it all clipped back together if you take it apart for servicing. Mechanically, you can see it uses the same style of trucks as the FA. Of course, there are the EMD appropriate Blomberg trucks on this in this case. It's the all brass gearing again, and overall it's fairly easy to manage this. You just want to keep it lubed, because those brass gears do like to eat themselves if they're not properly lubricated. But overall, it's a really nice looking model. The big difference again from the FA is we have a plastic casting for the shell rather than the cast metal of the FA. A slightly later model and a stalwart through the 1980s is the Arnold GP9, which was also accompanied by a GP7. It also has brass gearing, although parts of the drivetrain are a little bit quieter. Under the hood, the GP9 and GP7 are the same. They also shared the same frame with a GP30 model, which I don't have an example of yet. The main thing that they determined as the difference between a GP7 and a GP9 is this dynamic brake blister, which is removable. Of course, if you're familiar at all with the prototype, you know that there's a whole lot more in play than just a dynamic brake blister. Taking the dynamic brakes off of a GP9 does not give you a GP7. But anyway, the mechanicals are very similar in construction to the other two models. A heavy metal casting, the motor's inside there. The big difference is the orientation of the motor sets it at a level where they had to use that cup gear to transfer power to the trucks. And again, the trucks are similar in construction to the F and the FA. The metal casting of the fuel tank actually is what you use to clip the shell on. Overall, the shell is not a bad detail. It does have the traditional open pilots of the early days, which allows those truck-mounted couplers to swing. The handrails are a little bit coarse, and the hood is a bit on the wide side from the scale dimension, but for us guys that are just running trains fast and loud, it's the perfect model to have. And these big metal castings on all of these things make them tremendous pullers. You can pull a really long train with one locomotive, which is a lot of fun. A quick way to tell the two versions apart is the earlier Rapidos came in the cardboard box with the foam insert, and the later ones that were imported by Walthers come in the familiar Arnold box with the orange sleeve. Another way to tell is to look at the bottom of the locomotive. Everything's pretty much the same, except the earlier edition has a single screw that mounts the truck with a clip at the coupler end, and the later version has two screws in the truck. Let's see how it runs. You've got to love that turbo whine you get from those cup gears. It's also fun to note that this model was released in the summer of 1969, when Penn Central was only about a year old. And you have to imagine the planning for it was taking place before Penn Central knew what their paint scheme was going to be. If we compare it to the Bachmann model, which came out a little bit later, you can see that they were pretty much guessing. And Arnold let things get a little steamy too. This is the Arnold Rapido Pacific, a 462 steam locomotive. And like its diesel counterparts, the boiler shell is cast metal, which makes it an outstanding performer in terms of tractive effort. And there's no need to try putting a sound system in it because you'd never hear it over that big brass idler gear. And finally, we've got the Arnold S2 switcher. These were manufactured from the 70s on, and you can still find them on the aftermarket for a reasonably good price. It's a very good switcher. It's got reasonably good slow speed and all those kind of things, but like its other counterparts, it's a cast metal shell and big brass gears. It uses similar the clip-on trucks and those kind of things. It's a metal shell with a plastic cab, and also, like all of the other ones, with the exception of the F unit and the steam locomotive, it doesn't have any factory headlight. Great little engine. Well, enough of me grinding on. Let's let those brass gears do the talking. There's another notable Arnold Rapido model from the early era, and that's the GG1 locomotive, but we'll cover that next time when we're playing with electric trains. So until next time, happy high railing.